And we are live. Hello, everyone. We are back with another podcast episode. This is my third attempt at doing an introduction because I'm not very good at these. But I'm here with my friend Jacob. I don't know if any of you have seen any of our podcasts we've done before, but the idea is that we like to talk about things that are going on with content in the marketing space. We're trying to look at all different kinds of stuff, from AI to campaigns that were good to campaigns that were bad. And we're just trying to sort of establish trends that are out there, the way things are moving, social media, all that good stuff. Trying to analyze and understand the market. We are experts at what we do, but we're not experts at the rest of it. So we're kind of analyzing and seeing how we go as we go. And yeah, so Jacob, would you like to introduce yourself to the people for our... we'll probably have new listeners today, I'm guessing. So, you know.
I hope so. Yeah, I would. Thank you, Harry. So my name is Jacob. I've been a copywriter for about 7 years now, both agency and freelancing. Currently independently contracting with agencies and directly with clients, mostly in Asia Pacific, but I've also done a few kind of campaigns and client work across the world as well. And it's largely pure play copywriting. I've done a bit of work on quite a lot of work on longer form content and a bit of content planning, but no, I am by no means an expert on the wider world of marketing, especially with bigger brands and so on. So it's always really interesting to see what is out there, especially at the upper end of the market, you know, the big scale stuff like the Super Bowl campaigns, and really getting a sense of, as you say, how and why the market responds to some things well and others not so well. And just seeing what creative output is out there right now, especially in the age of AI, you know, where things are kind of changing on a daily basis.
Yeah. And I myself, I should probably say I'm a video content creator. I've worked with corporates, I've worked with professional athletes, all sorts of different stuff. I've worked with quite a few influencers now as well, so today's conversation is going to be quite an interesting one. But I think the main reason we want to do this is just to try to make sure that firstly we're staying relevant, but also so that you can come on that journey with us, because we like to look at what's going on. I mean, even for example, this week or in the last couple of weeks, I noticed that LinkedIn are now doing reels, like video reels. And so, you know, that the implications of that, and we'll definitely talk about that at another date, but the implications of that are going to be really interesting because there really isn't another sort of business social media platform that's definitely not as prevalent as LinkedIn anyway. So for the corporate world, that's going to be fascinating to see how that kind of evolves corporate voices and branding and whatnot. But today, Jacob, you showed me something this week that I thought was really interesting and definitely worth discussing. And we're going to be talking about today why Snoop Dogg giving up smoke was not a good idea. So I've tried to go for like a little... I actually wrote that out. You said that before. I was like, I like that. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to say it out loud. And basically...
You can't spoil the magic, Harry. You can't give them a look behind the curtain. You just say you came up with that on the fly.
Do you know what, mate? I'm a brutal remover of that third wall. I like people to look in and see exactly what's going on. So
that's not what marketing is about at all.
But I'm not trying to, mate. I'm not trying to dupe the people, man. I like to let people know what's happening. But you sent me this sort of this campaign that happened, and it was a company called Solo Smoke with the rapper Snoop Dogg, who is obviously known for being a big smoker. And perhaps you could explain what the campaign was all about. I'll make sure we have some good content overlays on this so people can see exactly what we're talking about. So far away.
Yeah. Sure. So going right back to your point at the very beginning, when you introduced the video, talking about good campaigns and bad campaigns, this is an interesting example, I think, of a campaign that was both very, very good and apparently, or at least as far as the company was concerned, the client was concerned, very, very bad. So much so that the CEO, who was in charge when the campaign was launched, ended up being fired. And so what happened in a nutshell was that one day out of the blue, Snoop Dogg posted to his millions of followers on Instagram a very kind of dramatic looking image of him, you know, holding a praying hands pose and everything, with a quote on the image, and it said, after lots of consideration with my family and friends, I have decided that I'm giving up smoke. Please respect my privacy at this time. Now, as you say, Snoop Dogg has been a prolific cannabis user for much of his life, and I think he's the wrong side of 50 now, you know. So you could say this campaign has been kind of years in the making, in a sense. And so the response on Instagram was, as you'd imagine, people went wild. People couldn't believe that this kind of famous smoker was announcing so publicly and so abruptly that he was giving it up. And it was revealed a couple of weeks later, I can't remember the exact timing, but it was revealed in a subsequent video that he produced with this brand, Solo Stove, that he was in fact giving up smoke in the barbecue sense, which is to say that he was promoting this company's range of effectively smoke-free stoves for campfires,
fire pits,
and barbecues.
Yeah,
fire pits. Yes, exactly.
I have an announcement. I'm giving up smoke. I know what you're thinking. Snoop, smoke is kind of your whole thing. But I'm done with it. Done with the coughing and my clothes smelling all sticky icky. I'm going smokeless. Solo Stove fixed fire. They took out the smoke. Clever.
And so, genius, I thought, like a really, really clever way of generating significant kind of interest and curiosity and awareness at first. And then the big reveal, I thought, really, really played into, and they did it with lots of humor. It was a very well-produced video. And the big reveal really played into the fundamental USP of the product. There was a very clear distinction between giving up smoke and going for a smoke-free barbecue set. And everyone went wild for it. It was hailed as, all of the marketing publications like Adweek and so on hailed it as one of the most kind of creative and interesting and genius ads that they'd seen that year. And
sorry to interrupt, when researching this, despite, we'll get to why it was deemed a failure in the end, but there was a couple of PR firms that were sort of are still claiming it was a success. So in a sense it was.
In a sense, it was, and so we can get into that kind of definition in a minute as well, for sure. And the CEO himself posted on LinkedIn saying how brilliant Snoop was to work with and how proud they were of the campaign, how pleased they'd been with the results, and because they were generating unbelievable kind of metrics, the impressions, the earned media spots they were getting from mainstream publications. Like this went pretty viral, but within, I think, two or 3 months of that LinkedIn post, that CEO was no longer at the company. He had been summarily dismissed because no matter how clever the campaign was or how many people thought it was kind of shocking and interesting and funny all at the same time, and despite their thousands of new Instagram followers and billions of impressions and all the rest of it, they simply didn't get the sales that they were looking for. After what I hear was a significant mid-7-figure investment into Snoop Dogg services, and really just for 2 pieces of content. I think there was the original Instagram post, and then subsequently the long form video, which was posted on YouTube and other outlets. So they paid Snoop Dogg an eye-watering sum of money.
Yeah. We ran some basic numbers before, and we were sort of trying to work out like rough. I think that someone had estimated he was paid sort of $60 million for the campaign, and if the stove's $500, we sort of estimated you'd have to sell like 125,000 units of this smokeless fire pit stove to break even on that investment. So.
Which is a lot of stoves, like
they're big boy numbers. They're big boy numbers.
They're big boy numbers. I mean, they're a big boy company. The company themselves have been doing, especially since the pandemic. I think when people were doing a lot of kind of home improvements and whatnot, they saw their sales numbers soar during the pandemic, and they've managed to maintain a pretty healthy sales pipeline since. We're talking multi-millions of dollars here in revenue. Yeah. But still, that's a lot of stoves you have to sell to recoup your investment. And so. And so ultimately, it was a very good advert in terms of the cultural alignment, if you like, of the kind of the concept of this prolific smoker giving up smoke, and then it turns out it's for a barbecue. Like there's a lot of creative genius in this campaign, but when it comes down to brass tacks, when it comes down to P&L, the board decided that they simply hadn't seen enough return, and so. There's a really interesting conversation here about what determines good and bad in a campaign. There are obviously lots of different objectives, lots of different goals that you have when you're marketing and selling a product. And I guess this begs a wider question. How do you determine success?
Definitely, and it's it's a big talking point for us. We're both content creators. And it's that magic phrase that always comes up, which is return on investment, that people want to see when they invest in their communications and their marketing, especially in content, because it can be pricey, it can be expensive, and so you want to make sure that you're doing it, and it's actually going to lead to extra sales. And this is a really interesting campaign because I think, firstly, it was expensive, and so I think when we looked into it in a bit more detail, I did a bit of reading in anticipation of this call, and we saw that in a couple of articles they basically explained that their most successful quarter was usually the final quarter in the year, and yet I think they released this campaign in that quarter. So I think there was a sense of it with this that it was kind of a last-ditch Hail Mary to try and boost sales, when in reality, this was a very successful campaign if you were judging it on awareness, and that's exactly what this generated. It was a huge amount of awareness. I'd never heard of this company before until I heard about this campaign, and so the awareness is clearly there now for them, and I'm still pretty sure that down the line they're going to reap the benefits of that campaign. I think if they follow up on it correctly, but it's that age-old argument with content of what does success look like, and that's why it's so important with you sort of define what that is before you begin. And I just think, mate, that this was a tremendously successful awareness piece that they overpaid for, no matter how you look at it. But either way, if you were just judging this by sales, which they were, it wasn't a success, I suppose. So yeah, it's a difficult one to kind of rationalize, I guess, if you're the person in charge.
Yeah, and these companies aren't charities, like ultimately it's all about the bottom line. It's about the P&L, and in this instance, they spent more than they recouped. But you're right. Success doesn't always have to look like sales in the short term, at the very least, because they grew their audience significantly, boosted their brand awareness massively through paid and earned media. And created one of the most talked about campaigns, certainly in the back half of last year. But as you point out so rightly, it was literally a fourth quarter Hail Mary around the Black Friday shopping season. A time of year which a lot of people have already allocated their funds elsewhere. These are not cheap stoves. I think they range from say $300 to $500 US. These are not. You talk about the customer buying journey or the sales funnel or however you want to describe it. This is not something which people are prepared to click buy now on. The minute they see this video.
It's not a low ticket item. It takes consideration.
It's not a low ticket item. Yeah. Exactly that. People just aren't sitting there ready to make a decision on a barbecue pit, at a moment's notice, And I think what maybe happened with this campaign is I think it speaks to maybe a lack of alignment and clarity between sort of the branding, sales, marketing, and product teams, all at the same time. Because as brilliant as the concept of, again, this prolific smoker giving up smoke, and it turns out for a smokeless barbecue, as brilliant as that concept is, I wonder what the Venn diagram looks like, if you like, between the people who know Snoop and are fans of Snoop and are well aware of his presence and cultural identity, if you like, versus the people who are actively interested in spending $500 on a smokeless barbecue pit for their home.
100%,
I wonder where.
100%.
Yeah, I wonder where in the middle the realistic potential buyer's market is.
Yeah, how much of that demographic that you access by using Snoop Dogg is actually going to spend $500 on a smokeless fire pit? And I mean, the thing is, and also, this also does call into question, the value of the product. Like, I understand there is a market for a smokeless fire pit, but what is the size of that market? Obviously, I have no idea. I'm not a fire pit expert. I would need to see some numbers. I guess they felt confident enough, in the product that it would go and sell enough units, but this is just us having a conversation. We're having to speculate a bit here because we don't know the ins and outs. But these are the kind of things you look at it and you sort of think about when you're looking at it. It also makes me think about, you mentioned before that they were a company that grew during COVID, and I imagine that their brand voice was probably quite different in the build up to this campaign. And I just feel like, you look at like Dollar Shave Club or like Paddy Power or any of these brands that are like very, very good at harnessing pop culture and narrative and humor. They're really good at that sort of thing, and so you expect it from those brands. I just sort of wonder if firstly, if this was the right move for them in terms of who their current current clientele was, current customer base was. Because obviously it had mass appeal. It did really, really well in terms of drawing in a larger audience. But like you said before, are they the ones that are going to spend $500 on a smokeless fire pit? Obviously not. But then there is also the argument that potentially if they'd started campaigns of this ilk earlier in the cycle, a few quarters before where they launched it, it might have been more impactful when it actually happened. But I also do think there's an argument to say though that it had such a large impact because it was a new thing. It was a new piece of content from them, and it did essentially like launch them into the public. What's the word I'm looking for? The public mind space. Like, I now know who they are. Lots of people now know who they are. In terms of awareness, it's a smashing success. It's just that they didn't need awareness; they needed sales.
They needed sales. Yeah, I think this was kind of the wrong way to go about it. And yeah, they're very much now part of or at least they were part of the public consciousness. But now I can't speak to what they're doing on a campaign basis. I'm not sure what their current marketing looks like, and it'd be interesting to see like whether when this fourth quarter rolls around, because I presume they see the massive uptick in sales numbers because it's the colder winter months, if you like, in most parts of North America anyway, which is where they're based. I imagine they see this uptick at this time of year because of that, and so it'll be really interesting to see whether there's like a tangible spike in sales numbers this year following this campaign that they did last year. It may well be that this ad really has burrowed its way into the minds of the potential fire pit buying public, and they will, and Solo Stove will be their first port of call when it comes to shopping for their new smokeless barbecue this winter. And it may be that the CEO, the poor CEO who got fired because of this, gets to sit back and say, well, I told you so. This was a long-term brand awareness play, or it might not, because after all of the fuss, after all of the fuss, and then there was and then there was certainly a bit of fuss about the CEO getting sacked because no one could believe that was the end game for this campaign. I'm not sure what they've been doing since. So,
yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see how it plays out. But with the information we have, I think we can say great awareness piece, not such a good sales piece. But there's so many reasons why something might not sell. It's also worth mentioning that, like, how did they follow up with targeted advertising on the people that engage with those ads? There's so many pieces to this puzzle. We just don't know exactly why it went wrong. What we can do is speculate. But I think what's really interesting from my perspective is because we've talked a fair amount about I'm always talking about human-centric marketing and branding, and when I do my video content, I love putting people at the center of them. I love putting a story in there and human traits, making content that's relatable. I really feel like you connect with people on an emotional level then, and that's a great way of selling anything, a service or a product. And I think this is a really interesting thing to kind of talk about in relation to that, because the fact that a company was willing to pay so much money for somebody's charisma, their story, Snoop Dogg being the human embodiment of somebody who is you can't separate you can't separate Snoop Dogg from smoke. You can't. So it's such a genius pick. But the thing is, if he hadn't lived his whole life the way he has, it wouldn't have made sense. But like, there's no replacement for that. Like, it's a human story. It's a human character. He is like a pop culture figure, an icon, and without him being who he is, the campaign doesn't mean anything. And so it's his charisma, it's his story that made this a viable thing to do in the first place. And I think it's worth mentioning that because there is so much talk these days about very sort of cheap, bland marketing that the AI will produce. And, you physically cannot do this campaign without people at the center of it. And so I want to consider a success as an awareness piece. If it had just been an awareness piece, I think it's great. And so taking it for what it is, if it was used in that way and it had the right structure around it, timed correctly, if the numbers all added up, it was great. And so I think it's really worth mentioning that because it's just something it's a very, very human campaign. And that's what I like about it the most.
I completely agree. I think it had unbelievable potential. I think it was an amazing campaign, executed poorly, basically, because I think you can see in terms of the timing, in terms of the in terms of these, even the supporting campaign or mini campaigns, or whatever you want to call them, around this thing. You know, from what I'm aware of, it was just the Instagram post and then the follow-up YouTube video. You know, but if you were to have gone to their website, as you say, is the brand as a whole is kind of different from this new angle they were taking with this cult figure of Snoop Dogg. You know, there wasn't quite like an identity alignment there in the more general sense, and so there could have been maybe more done around that to make it feel less of a jarring contrast to their traditional branding and marketing and advertising. You know, they could have built. I mean, saying this though, and we already know how big the fee was for just those two pieces of content. So maybe I'm sure they were limited by how much work they could do with Snoop himself, but they could nevertheless, I think, have done a lot more around this as a long-term campaign, rather than just, you know, this fourth quarter Hail Mary looking to get, you know, holiday sales at the last minute.
It's a real shame. It's a real shame. I think the people that were working on the creators behind the scene will be really disappointed at how it went, because, you know, if I'd worked on that, I'd have been really proud of it. I'd have been really happy with it. Having said that, I mean, I think it's not. He kind of writes himself, Snoop Dogg. You know, I think he's that charismatic and he's that good that you know, there's a reason that you pay the money you do to work with somebody like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agreed. He's one of a kind, and I think that return on investment could have recouped itself. Maybe not in the. I think expecting them to return. I think expecting to recoup that level of investment with 1 month to go in the fourth quarter of holiday season was always going to be unrealistic. You know, that's a lot of stoves to shift in a short period of time. But if they had managed this over a more considered long-term kind of campaign calendar, as it were, with maybe a little, if not with Snoop himself again because of the fee, but like with little kind of micro executions around it, like building this up after the big reveal or what have you, then I think they would have, over the course of the following financial year, you know, they may well have got their money back and then some, well, at least. But I think, a really, really good, interesting campaign. Because I saw the initial post on Instagram,
right,
without any context, and I was just as shocked as everybody else. I couldn't believe it. And then when I learned in 2 weeks' time or whatever it was that it was actually an ad campaign, I thought it was just a slow clap moment, you know. But did I go and check out their website? Maybe. I mean, I'm based in Malaysia right now, so I'm not going to buy a $500 stove from the US anyway. But
yeah,
you know, the point being, I was bowled over by the creativity and the kind of the angle that they took with this campaign. But did it move the needle for me in terms of thinking, hey, I could use a smokeless fire pit? No, you know. Yeah. And I you know. I
think it's I think that it, you know, I guess as because I think, you know, we've kind of talked about it enough now, but I think as kind of a final thing, it's like basically what we're saying is this needed a lot more long-term strategy around it, and I think it was sort of a great idea, really well executed in terms of, you know, the content that they made. But if they'd done it as a long-term play, if this was early on in their strategy and they'd built around this, I think it could have been wildly successful. And I think it really speaks to how essential it is to kind of have that consistent brand voice, that consistent content, to, you know, have that initial awareness campaign and then build on it, and to build your client base that way. And, you know, it's having that one-off punt is all very well and good, but it clearly didn't work in this case. And I think there's, you know, I wouldn't rule it out working for a different product. I think it was probably just the price point that limited it as much as anything. You know, if it had been like a $10 something or other lighter or something like that, maybe it would have been different.
Well, funny you mentioned that. Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart actually have teamed up with the company BIC, you know, BIC, who do biros and stuff, and they're selling a range of fire lighters. And there's a genius point of sale. Yeah, there's a genius point of sale kind of cardboard cutout that you see in hardware stores where Martha Stewart's holding the lighter. It's one of those long oven, the ones that use on gas stoves, or not, a fire lighter. Martha Stewart saying it's perfect for stoves, and Snoop's holding it saying and for other things.
Yeah, of course.
And it's implied. So I mean, I'm not sure what the results of that campaign are, but maybe that's something we can look at another time.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. We should talk about that one day. But yeah, I think we'll wrap that today. But I think, yeah, Jake, moving forward, I think we should keep this going. I'm keen to dive into some more stuff with you. As I said, I'd really like to discuss the the move into the LinkedIn video stuff. And
yeah, the TikTokification of LinkedIn. I think that's definitely something we can talk about.
Yes, and just in general, moving forward, I think, as I said at the beginning of this podcast, the idea here really is just for us to kind of dive into things with a curious mind and try to understand what's happened, what's gone on, and sort of lessons that can be learned. So I think it's something that me and you talk about quite a bit already. It's just that sort of planning side of things, that strategy and making sure everything's aligned. I think this was a great example of, you know, really good creatives working with a team that had other ideas, basically. But yeah. But mate, thanks for your thoughts. I really appreciate it. It was great chatting with you as ever.
Always a pleasure, Harry. Thank you, and I look forward to our next talk.
Good stuff, mate. Catch you later.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.